Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Elizabeth Yankee. I'm the Member Services Director here at the League of Wisconsin Municipalities, and this is part of our Food for Thought Brown Bag Lunch Series. Today, we are going to discuss resiliency and sustainability. It's our theme for the month of April 2024, and we have with us Sarah Hudson. She's with the City of Ashland, and we're going to talk about some initiatives that Ashland is doing. After that, we'll hear from Kelly Hilligard, and she's with the City of Middleton, and we'll hear some of the award-winning efforts that Middleton is going through. And then Kate Beardmore with DHS, and we're going to talk about some new tools that the state has for us. So we'll get started right away. And Sarah, go ahead and share your presentation, and we'll get started. And you are muted.
Thank you. All right, 1 second, everyone. Just making sure technology is going to work with me.
Sure. And once again, the chat box is open. So if you have questions for our presenter, feel free to put those in the chat box. I'll have a chance to ask some of those as we get towards the end of the each presentation. And then hopefully we'll have some time at the end for all three presenters to answer questions.
Awesome.
And Sarah, if you could put that in presenter mode, I think it'd be helpful.
Is it not in their presenter mode right now? Trying to think of what. Sorry.
That's okay. Yeah. We're seeing just the regular PowerPoint as if you were editing it.
Got it. Let me do this again. Sorry, everyone.
That's all right. We said earlier today, Microsoft changes things and doesn't let us know, and Zoom changes things and doesn't let us know. So we just have to be on our toes and flexible with everything.
Oh, now it's not showing. Okay, come on. Of course, this just makes it like just as nerve-wracking when it doesn't want to work. There we go. Let's try this. And share.
Perfect. That looks great.
Awesome. Okay, here we go.
Thank you.
All right. Sorry for that, everyone. So hi and welcome. My name is Sarah Hudson. I am the Parks and Recreation Director and City Forester for the City of Ashland. Ashland is located on the very northern shores of Wisconsin on Lake Superior. I'm here today to tell a story of resistance, resiliency, and sustainability on the shores of Lake Superior. So to do a brief overview, here's just kind of a map of where you can find Ashland. Ashland's in that kind of lower right-hand corner that's over there, but we're about 60 miles away from the Twin Ports, Duluth, Minnesota, and Superior, Wisconsin. We're also the southern gateway to the Apostle Islands National Lakeshore, and we kind of serve as the hub for the surrounding communities of the Chequamegon Bay. So the City of Ashland's mission is to always promote the betterment of Ashland. Our vision is a thriving community that values its natural environment, our history, our unique and diverse cultures, our way of life, and our stewardship to Lake Superior. Some of our strategic priorities are infrastructure, the environment, housing, economic strength, and good governance. Ashland tops Wisconsin, we say. And so that picture right there just shows that where we're located, and being on the shores gives us some unique perspectives on what Lake Superior can give us. Before I start talking about some of our resiliency and sustainability measures we're talking about, I want to give a little background on what what we have within our community. So the City of Ashland maintains 22 parks, 11.5 miles of paved ADA compliant trail, 1 public boat landing, 4 public beaches, 10 playgrounds, 2 public campgrounds, 1 skate park, and owns/maintains over 300 acres of parklands and green space. Now, that's a lot of stuff, and a lot of our parks, as you can see in green on this map, are located along the Lake Superior shoreline, which is pretty cool, knowing that we probably own about half of the shoreline is public land. But a lot of that public land was once industrial shoreline, which you'll see on the next slide. Ashland also isn't as big as it used to be. It's only about 7,800 people, filled up, hardy, and resilient, loving to be here. So this photo kind of shows what our historical shoreline used to look like. This is from the 1930s. At one point, it is said Ashland had just over 1,600 or 16,000 residents. So we have an infrastructure that was built for a community twice our size. And so, as you can see, our shoreline was all industrial, and it is why people came to the shores of Lake Superior, because Ashland was a main port. So with being located on Lake Superior, we have some coastal impacts that happen. Over the last 10 years, we have experienced 6 major storm events that are supposed to be 100 to 500 to 1,000 year storms, all within a very short amount of time. So some of the coastal impacts we have, which have led to some resiliency and resistance and sustainability measures, are in 2016, we had 2 major events that happened 2 weeks from one another. One major event was a flood that affected a lot of the southern Ashland County, but it also made Ashland into its own little island. We couldn't, if we wanted to go to Ironwood, which is only 45 minutes away, we actually had to go to Superior and south. It would take you 5 hours to go that way because so many of the roads were destroyed because of the floods. 2 weeks later, we had a major windstorm that actually took down a bunch of trees within campgrounds, knocked boats over. We had A-line winds that were clocked at over 75 miles an hour. So those are hurricane force winds in the middle of summer. And then in 2017, in October, which everyone talks about the gales in November, it's starting to be the gales of October. So in 2017, a storm surge happened and what lake levels rose 18 inches and deposited about 12 inches of soil into our pavilion at Career Park, damaged about a mile of our trail that goes along the shoreline, and all 4 lanes of Highway 2 that you can see in that center picture were covered by water. We actually had to take the snow plows out to remove the driftwood that covered all of it. So it created a major obstacle for us to get in and out of town that day. But then also the cleanup effort took us many, many years to be able to recover from that. And then we're not done yet. In 2018 then, we had a major rain event on Father's Day. We got 3 inches of rain in just 15 minutes. The little map on the precipitation map shows, you can see where we're located. It was a red major storm. I was in a movie theater. My husband calls and says, "I'm okay." And I was like, "Great. I don't know what you're talking about." Came out and you could see the destruction that had happened. So 3 inches of rain in 15 minutes made for Pearson Plaza Park, that next picture over, to be a beautiful waterfall feature. We don't want to see that again. But that much rain also caused the lake to the bay to be brown for just over a month, and we weren't able to open our beaches and in a pretty important time of year because we were worried about high levels of E. coli. And then in 2019, we had another storm event that caused not so much as much of a storm surge that it had before. But you can see by some of these pictures that some of the work that we had tried to do to Maslowski Beach, which is on our western shoreline, also kind of destroyed that and created a little bit more uniqueness for us to be able to do. So a lot has happened in a very short amount of time, which has led us to implementing some coastal resiliency measures. So through funding, through the help of EPA, DNR, a whole bunch of other ones that are at the very end of this presentation, we've been able to start doing some work along our coastal shoreline. So at Maslowski Beach, we were able to implement some green stormwater infrastructure to help reduce some of the stormwater that runs off the beach, but then also put in some riprap to be able to stop the wind and wave action. Now, at this time in 2017, riprap was considered more of a resiliency measure. We now know that it's more of a resistance measure, but we're trying to combine the two to be able to put riprap in to save our hardened shoreline. Highway 2 is right next door to this park, so that we can stop the wind and wave action, but then also do some plantings on the other side of that to help if the wind and wave action comes back, it is absorbing what we're being able to bring in there. With our pavilion that's right on the lake shore, we also put in a retaining wall here so that can save some of the picnic tables and hopefully not take out the structure. And then the wishing well is just kind of a tourist favorite that's there. Other coastal resiliency measures that we've helped been putting in is that we moved a pedestrian sidewalk. It used to be in front of the pavilion. We've now moved it behind, closer to just further away from the shoreline. We've also made it out of concrete, which tends to be a little bit more strength when it comes to wet conditions. We've been able to put in new trails, moving it as far away as we can. More riprap. We really like riprap. It's not the solution, but we're working on it. But something else that we've also been able to do is that a lot of our infrastructure, so in the ground infrastructure, was still vitreous clay. And so that led to a lot of I&I issues that we were having. So part of our sustainability efforts is that we've been able to do some CIPP lining. So lining some of our sanitary pipes or replacing some of those sanitary pipes that are from the 1890s. Our water pipes are from the 1880s. Some of our sanitary pipes are from the 1880s. So just doing a whole street reconstruction projects and then lining some of the pipes that are in better shape to reduce that inflow and infiltration we're having, that then just leads to better water quality of Lake Superior. Some future projects we also have, we focus a lot on Maslowski Beach. It's one of the first things you see as you're coming into Ashland, or one of the last things you see as you're leaving Ashland along Highway 2. Maslowski Beach, oops, I put the wrong direction. That should be west, not east, but east we did already. We implemented that in 2019 through 2020 in the middle of the pandemic. It was hard to do a construction project, but Maslowski Beach west, it should say, we've just been working with the Great Lakes and St. Lawrence Cities Initiative on the Resilient Coastal Projects Initiative to come up with a PIF, so kind of a plan for the plan, they like to say, but something that'll help us hopefully find some more funding to be able to implement some green stormwater infrastructure at the last beach, reducing the runoff and reducing the amount of E. coli that we've been having at this beach, because Maslowski Beach is on the impaired waters list from the Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources. Another cool project that we recently acquired funding for is the Bay City Creek Riparian Corridor Restoration. Bay City Creek was once the historical dividing line between the two communities in like the 1860s. One was Whittlesey and one was Bay City. They combined to become Ashland in 1884. And so Bay City Creek, though, has been heavily impacted by the community. There was railroad lines that ran through it, over it, and the city's snow dump is currently right on its shores. And so you can still find parts of cars in there that were put in there in the 1950s to help with shoreline stabilization. Taking them out actually may cause more damage than leaving them in there. So this has been kind of a dream project of mine for a couple of years, and we've been working with our partners through the Lake Superior Collaborative, and then other federal funding agencies and local agencies to be able to make this happen. Part of this project will be to do some habitat modification. So Bay City Creek, you can see, is kind of in the red, that runs about 6 miles, starts 6 miles south of Ashland and then runs all the way to Lake Superior. It is a sub-watershed of the Fish Creek watershed. And so we got some funding from the Coastal Fish and Wildlife Coastal Program because of the critical species of the long-eared bat and the mud puppy that can be found in the waters. But that'll do some habitat modification and some stream surveying. Habitat modification meaning removing invasive species and planting with native species. And some of this plantings will be strategically done on the banks, so to reduce the sloughing and the sediment that gets into there. And then we just were awarded some GLRI Focus Area 3 funding to be able to do some stormwater mapping because there are about 30 storm drains that lead into Bay City Creek, but we don't know exactly where these storm drains come from. We don't have a clear picture on that. It will also help implement some green stormwater infrastructure by the city's snow dump site, reducing the amount of stormwater that flows in by up to 7 million gallons. Last year, when we had 5 feet of snow in my backyard, it was definitely that much stormwater that got put into Lake Superior. And then also doing more habitat modification, restoration, and then continuing to do that stream survey work. Now, some other projects, I won't take too much time on this because I know we have other presenters, but as part of the city's shoreline that you saw, our industrial shoreline, we're also trying to redevelop our shoreline to make it more public accessible and just to really work on kind of the blue or outdoor recreation economy that's happening in a lot of these post-industrial cities. So there's 4 different projects that I'm going to briefly touch base on the things that we've been working on. But a lot of these areas are all located right next door to each other, kind of in our central coastline. And they are the Ashland Marina, the Career Park Boat Launch, Career Park RV Campground, and the Ashland Ordock. One of these is like one project all combined. But Career Park redevelopment is the former Ashland NSP Lakefront Super Fun. I always say fun because it's not been so much fun cleaning up a super fun site. But we're trying to make lemonade out of lemons, I guess you would say. So the Superfund site was discovered in 1993, and we finally took over ownership of it in 2023. So it's been a long process for the public to finally being able to use about 6 acres of land in our central shoreline. What it did is that it cleaned up a contaminated site that was the former home of a lumber yard, the city's landfill at one time. We dumped everything into the lake when we didn't know it in the 1800s. It was also, and then it was a coal gasification plant. Also put all their remnants from what they did into there. And so it was and is still a very contaminated site. This site consisted of cleaning up on land and on water. Right now, like I said, we have ownership of the site, and we're working to find funding to make it into a boat landing. Our current boat landing is from the 1984. It's 40 years old, and it is definitely showing its age. So we're working on funding to be able to move this boat landing to the Superfund site so that we can have better access to Lake Superior. We started that project in 2022. We put in a new parking lot for it, the structure for the boat landing, and then the public has been able to use the site since 2021. We've been able to host the annual Book Across the Bay, which is a ski race that goes from Ashland to Washburn via Lake Superior, and then also the kids fishing contest by the Northern Rod Gun Club. The other project that we've been working on for a very long time is the Ashland Ordock. If anyone knows anything about the school district's mascot, we are the Ordockers. At one point in time, we have 4 Ordocks within our shoreline, and the Ordocks were, this particular Ordock is 66 feet wide and was 80 feet tall, and it had 4 lanes of railroad cars that went on top. The railroad cars would then dump coal into the ore ships that were waiting below. The city took over ownership in 2013, and in 2015, we were able to open the first half of it out into Lake, up to the public. It's kind of been broken up into 4 different projects. The first project was just getting the public out into the 1916 section, so that's the section closest to shore. The second project then was being able to open up the diamond section, or the 1923 section that was that sticks out onto the lake. So the Diamond Access project we completed last October. It says 6/24 right on the slide, but it's 98% complete. They're doing some final touch-ups in June when the contractor's back out. But the public now has access to 1,900 feet of a pier out into Lake Superior. And when you're out there, you're a 1/4 mile out into the lake, and it is pretty amazing. This walkway is ADA compliant, so now anyone who is able to can walk all the way out. And here are some pictures that show the walkway under construction, a giant crane making its way out, the steel that was used, and then you can see what we call the diamonds that were there, which were built for wave attenuation, so the dock would stay in its place when the nor'easters came. And then here's the very end of the project. And then along with this, we also acquired about 4 city blocks of upland. So we are working on the Stunts Avenue connector and the upland redevelopment. This is just a concept plan that we've come up with, but Stunts Avenue project starts within the next 2 weeks, and it will reconnect Stunts Avenue to Highway 2 again. And then it just redevelops this area of town that was, again, a industrial area, putting in some green infrastructure, ensuring that pedestrians have access to the waterfront, and then redoing the waterfront trail that's in that area. The Bayview Pier project, this is like a success and then a not so successful story. So the Bayview Pier project, the Bayview Pier is built on the pilings of an old Ordock that was here in town. It was built in the 1980s. It got damaged in the 2016 storm. In 2018, we built a new pier. This is a concept drawing of it. And then that was open to the public then in 2019. And then last spring, an ice heave came and it knocked the pier, did some damage to the superstructure of the pier. So a very successful story that we had, but also now we're trying to figure out what we can do with this pier and how we can replace it and still have something there for people to enjoy. And what that next structure looks like has to definitely be able to withhold what Lake Superior gives. And then a thank you to everyone. These are some of our funders who came, who have helped support us through all these projects. And then some local people who helped with the historical photos. So again, if you have any questions, please let me know. Hope that was good.
Thank you, Sarah. It truly is such a story of resilience, the city of Ashland. So thanks for sharing. You know, we often get questions on funding, and I think that's where I would start since there isn't anything in the chat right now. But you know, obviously there are the usual suspects. You might go to DNR or Bureau of Land Management or some other places where you can get funding, but how do you or how does the city go about, you know, finding some of these more specialized funding sources? What yeah, how do you find these?
I think some of the funding opportunities that we've recently been able to do is that we belong to the Lake Superior Collaborative, which I think is something new for up here. But the Lake Superior Collaborative is a group of government and non-government entities that come together to help to figure out ways to manage the natural resources of Lake Superior and also implement the LAMP, so the Lake Superior Lake-wide Management Plan. And so some of the fundings that we've recently been getting, some of those bigger dollar amounts have been through them. They've been getting funding. Those federal agencies have been getting some funding and they'll be like, hey, do you have a project that would fit this? And some of it's being kind of creative and reaching out to others who you were like, hey, I have this idea.
Yeah.
What do you think? Will it fit anything? And so I think a lot of it is just talking to the partners in the area and knowing what they're also looking for, because what we all want to do along the lake, not just Ashland, but Washburn, Bayfield, we're all really trying to be good stewards and how we can all work together. So a lot of it is just talking amongst ourselves, where funding is happening, talking with people at the Coastal Management Program. They seem to know what's happening all the time. DNR contacts, and a lot of it is getting emails. I think the other thing is that the city has a waterfront redevelopment fund. So we get a very small amount of dollars from our hotel and motel taxes, and we've put that into a specific fund to be able to use towards waterfront redevelopment projects. So that's where we're able to meet our matches, because that's really the hard part with a lot of grants, is that they have a 50 to 60 grant match. And if you don't have those match dollars or staff time to be able to meet those dollars, that's really tough. So we've been able to work with that and do that to help us get some of these projects done.
Yeah. Wow. Just a lot happening there in Ashland. There's a lot to dive into. Thank you for sharing the slides. They are up on our Food for Thought page under the April tab for everyone. So, and I did put in the note that the league just recently rolled out this access to grants, grant finder, not funder, finder. Sorry about that. Let's see if I can edit that. Nope. It's grant finder. But that's on our webpage. So if you want to request access to that grant finder, go ahead and look at that page. And with that, if you have questions for Sarah, put them in the chat. Hopefully we'll have some time at the end, but let's move over to Kelly from Middleton and kind of see what's happening in Middleton.
Hello, thanks for having me. I enjoyed your presentation, Sarah. My background's in landscape architecture, so I really appreciate seeing actual projects and drawings, work that I don't get to do right now, unfortunately, but I'm really interested in it. Now let me try to share my screen. Okay. Okay, do you see it as a presenter view?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, great. Okay, so my name's Kelly Hilliard. I am the sustainability coordinator at the city of Middleton. Middleton is just on the west side of the city of Madison, and we work closely with all of the Dane County municipalities down there. We function these days as one unit, it seems like, and share a lot of resources with one another. And I'm going to talk to you today about our Lead for Cities certification and how we used that certification to align our city planning efforts over the last few years. And I also have a background in LEED certification in green building. Worked on a lot of green building projects in the city of Madison back in the 2000s. And LEED stands for Leadership in Energy and Environmental Design. And what they've done is take a building certification that analyzes energy, water, waste in a building, and they've extrapolated that to provide a certification to analyze sustainability citywide. And that really interested me because I've gone through the process of LEED in buildings and seen how the process is actually really instructive for all the work you can do in a wanted to get a better understanding and baseline of our community at what our whole community, not just our city government energy use and waste use. Okay, let's see there. So just really briefly, I'm going to just tell you highlight a couple of these items. People often ask me, how did you start with sustainability work in Middleton? Because Middleton has moved fast, I think, in the last few years on a lot of sustainability projects. But I believe the reason why we've been able to is because there was groundwork done starting around 2009 with a first thing that happened was a sustainability committee that was formally constituted in our city. It's now a 10-member mayor-appointed committee, and we have one high school member who's a voting member of most of our committees in the city now. And that was really the impetus, I think, for really launching sustainability and having a voice, having residents be able to voice their concerns about sustainable policies in Middleton. They started out with a sustainable city plan, which they did a lot of public engagement for, got a lot of public buy-in really early on to set priorities in the city. And then worked on a lot of events, things like establishing community gardens, recycling center, big things in the city for about 5 years. But what really I feel like put us on the map somewhat was in 2016, Middleton was the first community in the country, I believe, to launch a climate referendum on the ballot, which posed two questions to voters. One was, do you support climate policy by the city to mitigate climate change? Secondly, do you support a carbon fee dividend program? And both of those votes came back a resounding yes. 82% of the voters responded that they wanted to support climate policy. And from there, we really, I feel like, strategically move forward. That vote helped us gain social and political capital, and we were able to establish 100% renewable energy goals for both our city government, but also community-wide. After we did that, it became clear that we needed more capacity with our staff to do some of this work that we've now promised. And so they hired a full-time sustainability coordinator. I started in 2019, and we received an energy innovation grant from the state to do an energy plan along with 6 other communities in Dane County. And that really provided a great roadmap for our city government to know how to prioritize projects that would meet the needs of the residents and what the city wanted to do with climate policy. From there, we just moved fast, I feel like, on a lot of planning that was coming down the pipe. And it was around 2020, 2021 that I got interested in looking at the Lead for Cities framework to use to help us align a lot of our plans and create the backup data to make the narrative and the case to both the public and council on which projects we should pursue and how they would help the community at large. Our energy resolution was for a long time and still is a seminal document in our city. It's not only just a far out 2050 100% renewable energy goal, it's 3 or 4 pages long, and it profiles a lot of benchmarks along the way and additional things like developing resiliency planning to help mitigate the effects of climate change over the next 10 years. And it also talks about a little bit about how to get there. When we began to pursue Lead for Cities, we had to apply to be part of a cohort, and we were selected to be as one of 20 cities in 2020. And we were one of the smallest cities selected to be in this cohort, and we were in the mix with cities like Newark and Louisville and Cleveland, Tampa. So we were sort of the small folks in the room. But it was, I think, also really instructive to have a smaller city go through this process. It's very rigorous process, and we decided to take a longer time than some of the bigger cities with more staff and really use the process to help us write our comprehensive plan, which we were working on at that time, and some other plans which spun off of that. This is a pretty picture of our Stonehorse Green in downtown Middleton, which is really busy even in the winter with events all year long. It's become a great gathering place. And this is just a slide. I won't read through it. You can look through it later, but it talks about how the Lead for Cities rating system was built for local governments, and it's been informed by over 15 years of work with many, many entities. Lead is always very iterative and it changes constantly. So I feel like it's always being updated to serve the clients or the cities or the building owners who go through the process. For us, we use LEAD to benchmark our entire city's sustainability, waste, water, energy, and quality of life. For me, I wanted to pursue Lead for Cities. My interests in it were to look at quality of life measurements. I was pretty familiar with how to measure energy and water use and that kind of thing, but how do you measure quality of life? How do you tangibly, obtain any data that will tell you, how do people feel here? Or do they feel a sense of belonging? What are they most concerned about? What are their distributional equity concerns with home ownership, or all those different metrics? So that was one of the big things that I wanted to use LEAD for. And then also to be able to identify our gaps and prioritize our next steps was probably the main thing. And it was a great time to pursue LEAD because we were writing our comprehensive plan at that time, and our sustainable city plan, and a whole host of other jobs. So Lead for Cities is a really great framework for this, I think. So if anyone's interested about pursuing Lead for Cities or what the process is like, please do reach out, because it was a great framework and provided a good process for us to analyze our planning. We used it with our comp plan, but also our sustainable city plan, which spun off of that. We also are using it now for the sustainable purchasing plan we're working on, and many others. This is our scorecard on the right here, and you can look through that at your leisure later. I think there were some credits that we could have pursued that we did not because we just ran out of time and capacity, but there are a lot of different ways to analyze your city, and this shows the breadth of that. The way LEAD's set up very quickly is that you have to meet a certain number of prerequisites. So first of all, you look at your base conditions, and this means you do an ecosystem assessment. You look at if everyone in your city has access to potable water, the quality of the water, look at power, solid waste, and do a demographic assessment. All of these things were really useful for me and then for staff to take stock of where we were as a city. Another part of the prerequisites is performance. So in addition to writing out the assessments, you do have to do some calculations and math with vehicle miles traveled, water consumption, and something that was a heavy lift for us, the greenhouse gas emissions assessment, which we ended up contracting with Slipstream to do a high-level GHG assessment for performance. And then the quality of life categories were interesting, and they showed a baseline of how we were doing across the city for median household income, transportation costs, air quality. And that was interesting, but we really got into some of the deeper issues once we started seeking the credits. The credits are all optional, so this is a pick and choose menu. Some things you may be more interested in than others. For us, I was interested in looking at distributional equity, meaning across the board, Middleton scores really high for a high quality city to live in. We have great schools, great, access to city services, that kind of thing. But when you start drilling down into the data and looking at the differences between different socioeconomic groups, then you see huge disparities. And I feel like going through this process really bore out that data and is now helping us to make the case to council and also the community at large, like what's really happening here. We do have food insecurity in our city, a lot of it. We have really high rents, and it's difficult to afford to live in Middleton. There's very few homes available. It's a growing area. So some of this distributional equity data really helped us drill into that and know where to prioritize our work, down to a lot of maps and block by block data. This is just a matrix showing the different credits and the different prerequisites, which you can look at later. I would just draw attention to the quality of life column, because those were really the aspects of LEED that I was so interested in. This is our sort of a high level report out of what Middleton needs to work on, what we did well on. It doesn't mean that we have a score of 100 for energy and we've mastered that. It just means when you compare us to all the other cities who have gone through this process globally, we are doing pretty well compared to others. I was pretty surprised that our water consumption didn't stack up with other cities. So that was something that's a red flag that we need to look at, that I really wasn't expecting. And so this was very high level, but interesting data when you look at the statistics behind this. LEED certification is a pretty rigorous process, I would say, but we had a really great advisory team that helped us through everything. They really do look at all of your data and all of your math, double check it, it's third-party vetted, and so it feels really good to have had many other sets of eyes on our data to see that we're really analyzing things the way we should be. So some highlights of this is that for our green spaces, Middleton far exceeds the required threshold for green spaces. We've always known that we have a really great parks and conservancy system in our city, and 100% of all of our residents are within half a mile of some really amazing parks and conservancy lands. So that was a really bright spot in our data. The gaps and areas for improvement were also really interesting to learn. There were things that we did learn that we didn't really know fully until we looked at the maps and went through the data. There's certain parts of our city that are cut off from, they're not as close to the civic resources like libraries and grocery stores as maybe we thought they were. Some people have to walk pretty far to get to a bus stop, things like that. We really didn't come close to complying to the lighting ordinance that LEED suggests we follow, so that we put that on the list for something to work on in the coming year or so. And we've now passed a lighting ordinance that does comply with LEED. So we're rectifying some of these things, and it was really a great way to go through and see what's low-hanging fruit, what can we change as we go through a zoning code rewrite with our comp plan and all of a strategic plan, all these different planning efforts. Because we're in a state where we can't exceed building code standards, we are still looking for ways to incentivize high-performing decarbonized buildings. So we're starting to address that. I'll just highlight one project that we're doing that spins off directly from some of our LEED data. It's called the Efficiency Navigator Program. We're doing this along with Eau Claire and Madison, and I believe other Dane County municipalities are also looking at this. This is a project that works in naturally occurring affordable housing to preserve that and help with energy efficiency and to drive down the costs of utility bills for tenants. And this is that housing stock that everyone has in your city, that they're not the big new apartment buildings, they're the older units, which may be drafty, may not have the best HVAC equipment, but it's really important to preserve this housing and improve it because it's some of the only affordable housing in Dane County. So we launched this program 3 years ago. We used American Rescue Plan Act money, ARPA. We're using $450,000 from that, and then Elevate Energy, one of our partners who's doing the work, they brought in an additional $180,000 to the project. We do have an eligibility criteria for this, and we based our eligibility criteria off of working with community partners like Way Forward Resources, our senior center, even public health, to help us know where to target our work within Middleton. So we did a lot of additional mapping. We used data from LEAD to find out where we should prioritize this work. The efficiency navigator model is really great, and I would encourage other cities to look into this or a program like this. But what it does is it meets property owners where they're at. A lot of them are very busy, have 2 or 3 jobs. They're managing these apartment buildings that are older, and they need a lot of help with building assessments, knowing where to start with some of this work. And the Navigator project takes the building owner and the project from beginning to end all the way through and helps the building owner, does most of the work for them and helps them navigate what to do in the projects. This is something you can look at later, but it shows within the Energy Navigator project where the property owner, where community partners, contractors fit into the entire program from start to finish. This is some actual data from a few of our buildings, which shows what the improvements we've made in just a few of the buildings that are part of the program. We have 15 or 16 buildings now that are between 2 to 4 units each that are in the program. And we're doing things from weatherization to adding heat pumps, all electric or dual fuel, and then hopefully 2 or 3 solar projects before this is all said and done with our ARPA funds. We hope to continue that project into the future. And just lastly, I'll just show you a couple slides that just talk about which plans we aligned through our LEAD data. There's quite a few. We did our comp plan, strategic plan, sustainable purchasing plan, all these things. We use the guidance from LEAD credits to help us fill out goals, requirements, thresholds to meet, and wrote them into these plans so that we can move forward with satisfying our gaps and improving. We also, I think one of the best things that LEAD helped us accomplish is leveraging grants. We were able to write in that we were part of this LEAD for Cities process, and I do believe it really helped us get 3 energy innovation grants, a public health grant from Healthy Babies, Bright Futures. We talked about LEAD a lot when we applied for the carbon reduction program to transition our streetlights to LEDs. So I feel like all of this is a strategic way of making the case, backing it up with data, and then starting to get funding to do the implementation. And some of the projects we're doing now include in the planning department, they've put in new bus shelters and bike racks and accessible bus landings for our new bus route that Madison Metro has established in Middleton. We're integrating public health into our programs more, and we now are working with Block Power, a company out of Brooklyn that helps you map your entire city's housing stock for neighborhood decarbonization projects. And I won't go through all of these, but I do feel like LEAD was a huge catalyst for us in with a lot, especially housing and trying to decrease the distributional equity concerns we had with home ownership and the cost and transportation for folks in Middleton. So we just want to keep going over these results. Still would like to publish a nice, slick report that shows everything that we learned from LEAD and how we're now tackling the issues that came up. And we were able to celebrate in Washington, D.C. when we were awarded LEAD for Cities Gold. We were the first city in Wisconsin to receive a LEAD for Cities certification. And I think there's a few other cities now thinking about pursuing this. So that's all I will say. And please reach out if you have questions after looking at these slides later.
Thank you, Kelly. Great information. I have lots of questions. Just a point of clarification, because we gotta get moving on to our last presenter here. But the Navigator project, you talked about existing housing and kind of putting some plans in there. Is that just in Dane County, or is that something that outside of Dane County people can plug into and be a part of?
Anyone can do it. There's no specific funding source you need to use for it. We're using ARPA dollars, but Madison's using capital funds. Eau Claire just recently signed a contract with Elevate Energy.
Okay.
Sustain Dane is also a major partner here in Dane County. And up north, Eau Claire is, every city will probably design their own program,
Okay.
but it's similar
Yeah.
across. Yeah.
Okay. I might tap you to talk more about that later on. That's very interesting. And then just real quick before we move on, you talked a little bit about data collection, and I think a lot of people struggle with where do I find this? How do I look at this? And I know there's data everywhere. What are some of the places that people may not necessarily think that there's data, but there's good data? What did you find are some of those places?
We used a lot of data from census tracts and census data. We also reached out to the county for a lot of our waste data and had to do some extrapolation. I think going through the process of gathering the data, even if you don't know how to do it starting out, it really brings to light ways you need to change how you get the data. Like it's really more about the process than it is even about the end data. Like we realize we don't even have waste data for our city beyond our municipal contract. So
Mm,
how can we improve upon what we can't track? So that's made us think about we need to ask for better data and how do we do that? So I feel like it was more enlightening than it was we learned how to do it really well. We learned where the gaps are in data and how
yeah.
to maybe approach it in the future.
Great. Well, thank you so much for your time. We've got one more presenter we'll get to quickly, and then hopefully we'll have some more time at the end here. Kate is with the DHS and has some new tools and information to share with us that if you're interested in sustainability and resilience, this is probably something you want to look into. So Kate, go ahead and share your screen when you're ready.
All right,
Looks
that
good.
should be showing. Excellent. So before I even get started, I'm going to put our website in the chat just so everyone has it, because all of these resources will be linked there. So what I'm planning on sharing with you all today, and more than happy to come back and go into any detail on any of these, but just some of the climate and health tools that we've developed within the climate and health program. We're located within the Division of Public Health, so we're looking at climate change mitigation and adaptation from a public health lens. I think for today, I'll just go over the Wisconsin focus tools, but there are so many other tools out there that likely you've heard of or seen that we can definitely talk on in a little bit more depth if folks are interested. So the first one I'll share with you all is our flood resilience scorecard. Now, the flood resilience scorecard is 3 different components, and it helps a community to look at their resiliency to flooding through 3 different lenses. So it looks at it through the institutional lens, an environmental lens, and a community lens as well. There's a data companion that comes along with it. So all of that tricky data that you mentioned that can be hard to find, we compile that for you. So you don't necessarily have to go digging for it to answer the scorecard. And then we have a list of recommendations at the end of it that can be anything from very super low, no cost, to very big infrastructure change recommendations based on the scorecard's results. Uh, Really, we see this tool as being valuable in a couple of different places, like in comprehensive planning or assessing progress made over time for grant applications, also as a way to facilitate conversations in the community around flooding. So this scorecard is really intended to be a way to answer questions about a community's resilience to flooding in a way that makes sense for them. I'll tell you a little bit about the scorecard, just so you get an idea of what those 3 different lenses that I mentioned are. So the first component is the environmental lens. So it's a series of questions that looks at the physical and natural landscape. So precipitation patterns, slope and elevation, land use, future development. It really helps to understand, what is the actual environment that the community is sitting in and where are the risks or resiliencies to flooding. The third or second component is the institutional lens, and this is going to ask questions around the government and infrastructural capacity, the content of existing policies and community plans, really trying to address the resource inventory and mapping, different plan quality components like that, to really understand where might be some barriers to flooding resiliency, or again, that resilience components when thinking about flooding in a community. And then the third component is the social lens. And I think this is what makes this tool a little bit more different from other tools that you might see talking about flooding, because it really looks at the cultural and socioeconomic sources of vulnerability and the potential for community partnerships in that community. So it really tries to emphasize that understanding a flood's effect on human health can help a community develop more holistic and equitable approach to resiliency. So these types of questions in the scorecard are going to look at sociodemographic characteristics, transportation and housing, health indicators, and different community partnerships that can be activated to help a community stay resilient in the face of flooding. So that's the scorecard itself. It goes through these three different components, asking various questions. And then, as I mentioned, there's the data companion, which includes 32 flood indicators. It's available for all 72 counties. It's available for 600 cities and villages. And again, it just provides that background data so that you don't have to go digging for it for your community. I will say that it is not available for townships. There's just something with the amount of data that we're able to collect to create, but that doesn't mean you can't complete the FRS with if you are in a township. It just means that you need to do a little bit more creative thinking, and I'm always there to be a resource in that case as well. And then, as I mentioned, the final component are those recommendations. So the FRS really we view as a holistic tool for understanding what the resiliencies are to flooding in a community. And we use it to really, as I mentioned, we use it to, or we picture it at least as a way to understand and look at comprehensive plans, facilitate conversations around flooding. So we recommend if you're going to fill out the scorecard to bring in folks from planning, from the community, different parts of bring in public health to really complete it with a comprehensive view of the community. And then there's a couple of other options that we've seen as well for ways to use the FRS. So that's just one of the tools that I wanted to mention. I'm going to skip through the next couple of slides to get us to our next. And again, so I know I'm going through these quite fast, so I know you have access to all of these. Please take a look. Feel free to reach me out to me if you have any questions or want to talk about one of these tools in more depth. But the next tool I'm going to mention is the Risk Assessment Flood Tool, or RAFT, as we've named it. So RAFT is used to prepare for flooding and to respond to flooding. It has 32 data layers from 12 different state agencies and federal agencies. It includes a FEMA flood hazard layer to view in relation to healthcare locations and other major facilities. It also combines social vulnerability and data by census tract, and includes live precipitation data, 72-hour precipitation forecast, live flood advisories, and river flood level status. So this is what RAFT looks like, and it is a online interactive mapping tool that you can use to see exactly what is happening in your community at this point in time based on the flooding that is happening. I know the last couple of months, it does not seem like we're getting a lot warmer and wetter, but Wisconsin is getting warmer and wetter. It's just that we're having large periods of drought in between large precipitation events. I think what Sarah mentioned about what happened in Ashland is really exemplifies what's going on in Wisconsin, where we're getting these big inundation events of precipitation over time. And RAFT can be one of those tools that you can use to see what is happening live in a community. So in looking at the map, you can see the flood hazard areas in red, and then the green dots on this map are where the different sensors are that are looking at what's the flood levels. But then I mentioned all those other data points. And so within RAFT, you can turn on a multiple different layers to see exactly what's happening, where that flooding might be impacting a community. So the first map on the left shows the H's are hospitals. The red dots, and I apologize if it's kind of small, but the red are school systems or childcare facilities. And then the smaller blue dots are where EMS is located. So you can see we have a couple of schools that are somewhat located to flooding near the Stevens Point area. Hospitals, though, are pretty well removed from flooding, which is what you kind of want to see. The middle map, I've added in the impervious surface layer. Oops, I went one too far. The impervious surface layer, so you can see where if you do get a large inundation of water, where pooling might happen or where it's not going to have any place to go, to better understand what roads might be impacted by a large layer of flooding. And then the map on the far right is having turned on the CDC's social vulnerability index. So the darker the color, the more vulnerable that community is, according to the CDC social vulnerability index. So it gives you, again, another picture to understand where the vulnerable populations to flooding and how you might be able to better prepare to support people if they need to evacuate or if they have a power outage and we need to be thinking about ventilators and medications that need to stay cold, where some of the communities that might not have their own personal resources to deal with those issues. So again, Raft is just one of the many tools that we have, and there's even more information in Raft than I've shared here today. And I know we're getting close on time, so I'll just quickly go over the heat vulnerability index. That's a geospatial analysis of heat-related vulnerability for Wisconsin, and then it goes into greater detail in the Milwaukee urban area with the heat island effect. Right now, it is currently a PDF, but in the next couple of months, this is going to be updated to a live website where you can zoom in and compare it. I've taken 2 screenshots so you can take a look at the different comparisons of like the health factors map versus an HVI map. Lots of different data that you can pull to see exactly which communities are going to be disproportionately impacted by heat or are more vulnerable to heat. So this, we're really excited, and it's going to be out in the next couple of months. We're just doing some beta testing right now, and it should be out soon. And then I think this is the last tool that I will mention, is our summer dashboard, hazard dashboard that we're coming out with. So in conjunction with the Office of Health Informatics and the Bureau of Environmental and Occupational Health, we've created a syndromic surveillance program to look at summer hazards. And this dashboard will allow local and state partners to understand it in almost real time, the extreme heat illness burden on Wisconsin's healthcare system during the summer. And then further, it'll also allow local emergency management and public health planners to better identify emergency heat response and plan trigger points for action during extreme heat events. Data that's going to be included in this is going to be heat-related illnesses, drowning, asthma-related illnesses, boating accidents, and we're hoping, but it will likely be in version 2.0, to also include smoke-related illnesses as well, with the higher increase of wildfire smoke that we saw from last year. So I know we wanted to give a little bit of time, so I apologize for buzzing through those super fast, but we have communication toolkits as well if anyone's interested in talking about climate change and its impact on health. I'm also available as a resource if you want to dive into any questions, or if there's anything that you felt I covered too fast. So I'll put my email in the chat as well.
Thank you. Really great tools. Quick question for you. Well, and if anyone does have a question, feel free to put it in the chat. But when we think of flooding, we don't necessarily think of DHS. I just want to quickly ask, what was the impetus for creating this flood tool within DHS specifically?
Yeah. So within our program, we're really looking at how climate change is impacting human health. And flooding is one of those that we don't often think of as impacting human health. We think a lot of the times of infrastructure. But after any major flooding event, you'll see an increase in blunt injuries, in emergency room visits, asthma rates increase as mold and inundation happens in houses. So there really is a large impact on human health that just is very hard to see without finding the specific data. So being able to talk about flooding more so than just impacting human health or impacting that infrastructure, but also human health, is a lens that we felt was really helpful for wanting to think about if you need to advocate for a plan change, or if you need to advocate for something, you can also say it will not only impact our infrastructure, but it'll make our community more resilient. It'll, help with mental health, because we see a huge impact of mental health as well when it comes to flooding.
Yeah. Great. Yeah. Getting ahead of, getting to the cause of some of those health risks that happen after that. Awesome. Thank you. I don't see any questions in the chat. Just a reminder for everyone, if you do want to save those links, feel free to save the chat. There's 3 dots or ellipses down at the bottom, and hit more and save. chat that should save to your desktop. We're just a minute after the hour. Just real quick, want to give another chance for people to put a question in if you have a question for any of our presenters. Otherwise we'll go ahead and great. I think we'll call it a day then. So thank you so much to you three for being with us and for your really great information. I may reach out to you and ask you to be in some kind of other scenario because you've all shared such interesting stories. So thank you for your time.
Thank you, everyone.